everyone. I'm Rita Kakati-Shah, your host for the Uma Show. Welcome to your one-stop journey for feeling empowered. We build confidence. We want you to be bold, be you, be Uma. Today, we're exploring women in education, and I'm so excited to be joined by a goddess of go-getting, Anjali Bhatia, who is joining us from New Jersey, and she is the Managing Director of North America of Crimson Education. Welcome, Anjali. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure. So let's start by telling us about your background and how you grew up.
Sure. So you just mentioned that I'm currently in New Jersey, and my background, it really has come full circle. So I grew up in New Jersey. My parents were actually the only family members that we had in the US. So it's very small, tight knit. I was an only child. They didn't have a lot of support without having family here. So I'm very close with my parents. And they are super hardworking. So I'd say that they've inspired me quite a lot. Over the years, I have not been in New Jersey. So I went to Duke in North Carolina. Then I moved to Washington, D.C. I did consulting, got to work with mostly education clients. I moved to Philadelphia and then San Francisco. And then just this last month, I'm back in New Jersey, came back to my hometown. So very excited to be here.
I love it. And hence the full circle part of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So education is a big thing, usually in South Asian families. You did an MBA from Wharton. Talk to us a little bit about your education choices and how that actually influenced your career.
Yeah, I'll actually take it back even earlier. So when I was in high school, I realized that there were a lot of ways to improve on education within my own experience. So my high school had volunteering hours, and I noticed a lot of people didn't take much from it. It was all about checking the box, how many hours you needed, getting that done. So I started to learn a bit more around social entrepreneurship, and I thought, hey, I want to share this. So I ended up speaking in front of my school. Other schools reached out. They wanted me to speak. And then I thought through what would be the most efficient way for people to have this educational experience. And I went through the process of actually creating my own lesson plan. This was back in the early 2000s, so it was a DVD. And I had, I was able to talk to social studies teachers across the country, send them the DVD, come up with, curriculum, lesson plan, etc. So that's what inspired my own interest in education. And then for myself, I've always seen that learning from academia is so powerful because you are getting the opportunity to hear professors' research. Yeah. Where they're actually analyzing all the research that's done out there and learning from the very best principles and practices. So when it came to something like an MBA, I knew that I wanted to understand both the academic perspective and then the tangible of being in the business world.
Wonderful. And again, it comes full circle. So you started off with the education background and you wanted to do something about it, make your own change. And then having that business background is an amazing next step after that. And then following your Wharton experience, you actually had various consulting projects under your belt. Talk to us a little bit about those and those sort of career interests of yours as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually started in consulting before Wharton. So right out of undergrad, I joined the education practice of a large consulting firm. And it was such incredible experience right out of undergrad because every few months I was in an entirely new place. I got to work with the US Department of Education, with nonprofits, with for-profits. And to never feel comfortable is so powerful. I always had new client projects. So I was really thrust into constant state of learning. So I really believe in consulting as a great opportunity for anyone to get a lot of exposure very quickly. So I really appreciated that experience. And then after MBA, I felt very confident. Actually, I'll tell you a quick story about imposter syndrome. So when I went to do my MBA, I was sort of kind of at a loss for what my actual skill set was. And I felt like, oh, I'm surrounded by these brilliant MBAs. Should I even be here? Classic imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And then the very first group project I was a part of, I realized I had learned all of these skills in my time in consulting that I hadn't been able to articulate. So I had, time management, project management skills, the ability to effectively communicate ideas that the group was talking about. I think it was very helpful to understand what consulting actually provided to me. And then when I left the MBA, I felt really confident that I could start my own entrepreneurial ventures and be a leader in my own right.
Interesting how times change, isn't it? And how the experiences that you have actually help shape that as well and give you that extra guidance. So thanks for sharing that. Talk to us a little bit about Crimson Education. What exactly is it and how did you get involved?
Yeah, so it is an education consulting firm. Our whole vision is around empowering high school students to be leaders of the future. So we work very closely with high schoolers and occasionally middle schoolers in a different capacity. But throughout high school, we help with teaching the right foundational skills, time management, all those sorts of things. And then helping students identify what their passion and interest area is and seeing how they could explore it with their own leadership. So this could be, planning a nanotechnology conference or starting an app or starting a nonprofit. So we give the guidance on how they can do that. And then it all really wraps up with how they portray themselves when it comes for opportunities like internships, jobs, and then of course, university. So we give a lot of guidance and mentorship in how you can portray yourself and how to really put your best foot forward to get into these very competitive spots.
And that's so important because a lot of people take for granted that think, you've got to start these mentoring initiatives and these empowerment initiatives later on when you're already in the workforce or when you've already gone through life-changing experiences. But actually it helps shape you more when you start earlier in education. So very, very good work that you're doing there. You do have quite a mentoring focus. Tell us a little bit about why you think mentoring is so important for empowering future leaders.
Mentoring is efficient. We're on this earth for such a short time period. You might as well learn from someone who has that expertise in what they're doing and hear their direct guidance, their advice, and their perspective. At the very least, it's worth you explaining your situation, your thought process, and having that sounding board for someone to push you on your ideas, give additional perspective. And that just makes sure that you're on the right path. I'll give you a very concrete example. So with education, we talk a lot about learning in a classroom versus one-on-one tutoring. Yeah. And essentially, if you are having concentrated tutoring, that's one-on-one for you, you can learn the same content in 1/4 of the time. So I think people often see the value of tutoring, but with mentoring in other spaces, it's still more of a foreign concept. But if you take that same principle, rather than you trying a whole bunch of things, researching nonstop, instead you have someone you can go directly hear how they've approached it in the past, especially if they're an expert, and be able to take a lot more of a direct path.
That's such a good way of thinking about it, actually, because, people do look to the mentor as a role model, as someone who's already done something that they're aspired to be. But that's so much more efficient and the hand-holding can really make a difference, as you said. So absolutely. In life, in work, we all have challenges that we've overcome some way or another or still getting over. Could you give us an example of a challenge that you may have faced and then how you overcame it?
Yeah, I have been very fortunate to be an entrepreneur and be a leader and manage a team of people. And sometimes you have to make really hard decisions, especially during the early days of the COVID pandemic. I had to go through the experience of laying people off. And, I owned a small business that I started when I was in my MBA, and we had to completely shut down during COVID. And going through the knowledge that this is just the absolute only decision we could make was to lay people off was It was hard. It was something that truly kept me up at night. It gave a lot of guilt when you feel like you're the entrepreneur, you're the owner, it's your responsibility. How could you do this to someone? It's someone's livelihood. So I approached it really with the most empathy I possibly could, to say, we do have to make this decision. Here's why, but I am here to help you in any way I possibly can. So, for each person I laid off, I would search other job opportunities for them in advance to send to them. I would give them kind of books and coaching things that I thought they might find helpful. Continuously checking in, seeing how I could be a reference or be helpful. And that meant that I was able to really keep up those relationships. And so it was very challenging, but at the end of the day, I do think that I was able to navigate it in a way that I feel was very ethical and I still feel good about.
Absolutely. And I love how you share that, because even with us during the pandemic a year ago at UMA, same sort of thing, having to furlough staff members, for example, is the same thing. But because that's what we do as well, empowerment platform, trying to help people out. It's like, okay, what can we do to help them? People understand at the end of the day. They understand this is the situation, what's going on. But doing that extra step is actually genuinely being a decent leader, being a decent boss, and actually helping people out. So thank you so much for sharing that. What do you do in your spare time, or what do you do to relax?
Okay, I'm going to share with you something a little bit unconventional.
Go for it.
So I really believe in the power of blood flow going to your head. So yoga is something that is a great way to kind of get your blood circulating. But sometimes when I just want to completely relax, I will lay on the edge of my bed and flip my head upside down. And I find that gives me my most creative thinking. I think, the blood's getting there. I have no distractions with cell phones or laptops. So I can just really be in my creative space, which I really appreciate. I love thinking about fiction, storybook ideas, thinking about new projects. So yeah, I think it's something that I like to share with others because I find it really helpful myself.
I love that. It's so funny because I see my kids doing that a lot, and I'm always wondering why they're always calm down afterwards. There you go. Well, thank you for sharing that. Before we let you go, what advice would you give to any young girls or women out there wanting to follow in your footsteps?
I would say that we, especially in the South Asian culture, put a lot of emphasis on learning hard skills. So doing well in your classes, making sure you have strong math foundations. But I would say it's worth it to invest just as much time in learning soft skills, negotiations, influence, public speaking. Even if these things come naturally to you, you can always learn from the best. So I would say for anybody who's interested, in going into business or education, to take that extra time to watch, shows like this one on YouTube, to read books, to actually practice negotiating things, push yourself out of your comfort zone and see how you can practice those skills, because it'll always come in handy for life events as well as work.
Absolutely. So well said. And to your point, the more you practice it, the more confident you become, and the more it just becomes natural to just get out there and speak and whatnot and do things like that. Thank you so much, Anjali, for sharing your inspiring story with us today. And thank you to our viewers for joining us on this empowerment journey. We want you all to embrace that inner goddess of go-getting. We want you to be bold, be you, be Uma.